Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of Space Problems. This is going to be a new podcast we're trying out. I'm Derek, and I'm joined by Ben, and we're going to talk about everything related to space, sci-fi, movies, TV, and you name it. So let's go ahead and get started. How's it going, Ben?
It's going. How are you doing, Derek?
I'm doing pretty good. So I don't know if you've been keeping up on what's been going on lately, but I think we should start with Star Trek because there was some... because there was some news. I know everybody's not, there's a lot of mixed feelings going on about Star Trek Discovery and the fan film, and I figured that'd be a good one to start off on. So for those of you that don't know, what's been happening lately is there's a new Star Trek TV show that's going to be coming out. It's called Star Trek Discovery, and it's been delayed again.
Yeah, I was going to say coming out is in quotes.
Yeah, a very quote-ish coming out.
How many times has it been delayed now?
At least twice. And they just they did announce that they just cast an actor for Sarek, who, for those of you that don't know, is Spock's father. But if you don't know that, I don't know why you're listening to this podcast.
Well, to be fair, I'm the casual Star Trek fan in your.
Oh, that's true. That's true. So, all right, fair.
I can be your exposition to explaining to people that don't know.
Okay,
you can use me for that.
Well, I'll be honest. I kind of thought this was sort of a weird thing to announce. I mean, I don't know about you, but it's sort of weird to announce that you've cast a character that, for all intents and purposes, is probably just going to be a guest spot. I don't really see Sarek as being like a main character.
I mean, wasn't it supposed to be February initially? It was like the very first release too. Like, yeah. I don't think if they announce casting this late in the game that they're a major part of it, unless they just haven't started yet.
Exactly. I kind of feel like this was more of a good news, bad news setup, where it's like, oh, we have to tell people we're delaying again, so let's give them something good. Hey, you know what? We were gonna hide the fact that Sarek is gonna be in this. Maybe we should tell people we have Sarek. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. It kind of feels like a weird,
I think when they started to get back into back in the 2009, the J.J. Abrams reboot of Star Trek, that's, there's that return of Star Trek fever and everything and it was hyped up for a while. Then I think, the mess that was Into Darkness and then Beyond, which I felt was a much better, superior film. Ever since it didn't do well.
Superior to what?
Well,
I mean,
personally, this is just personal taste when it comes to it for me, because I'm more of a Next Generation fan. I'm not huge on Star Trek, but all I've really seen is the original series and Next Gen. So I never did like Deep Space Nine and whatever else. But I felt story-wise, story-wise, Beyond felt more like Star Trek. Then Into Darkness felt like just fan service galore for 2 or 3 hours. It wasn't even true fan service, because I mean, who was it that yelled Khan this time? Wasn't it that was Spock that yelled Khan this time? And
right, yeah.
I'm pointing out the obvious. I think everybody,
I mean, there's no question. I think that Beyond is a better movie than Into Darkness. I don't think anybody's going to argue with you on that one.
But it just didn't do well at the box office, and I think now the Star Trek hype is like kind of dying down, and just getting back to the point of that's probably why they decided this announcement. They're like, oh, we got to start pushing this back out in the public eye.
That's a good point. I would agree with that to a degree. I think part of the problem is that, just to kind of briefly touch on the J.J. Abrams movies, I think the big thing that happened with that was when he did just his original Star Trek movie back in 2009, I think there was this big fever that came about, like this huge Star Trek hype, because Star Trek was like big and fun and exciting again, and everybody was really happy, and most fans, I feel like, enjoyed it enough. They were like, hey, this isn't quite Star Trek. It was still fun, and like it's more appealing to everybody. And I know for a fact that there's a lot of people that I know who never got into Star Trek that actually enjoyed it for the first time. So that was really exciting. I mean, it was really cool that this was like a gateway drug, for Star Trek. I thought that was really awesome. I mean, yeah, I had my problems with it. It's tougher for me to let go of some of the stuff that I love so much about the original series. But at the same time, I think Into Darkness actually did a lot to hurt it as a franchise.
Completely.
Because I think Into Darkness completely failed on that that magic formula or the secret sauce or whatever you want to call it that made the first one work so well. Because the first one was basically walking this amazing tightrope of little homages and touches to fans that only fans would get, like the tribble in the background and little references and things like that, but also making it really easy for anybody who has no idea about Star Trek to just dive right in. Mm-hmm. That was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of like the reset the timeline direction that they went.
It gave them a lot of freedom, and it let everybody know it's okay. It's okay that you don't know, like, this,
right.
you know.
So could you consider that almost history. Canon?
I mean, it's
because it's not ignoring, because or would this be like a soft reboot? Because it's not necessarily ignoring the. I mean, I guess it did with the opening scene. It's like just undoing it, but it's not. It didn't necessarily ignore it. I mean, J.J. Abrams does a good job of trying not to piss off fans.
True.
And he didn't have as much to do with Into Darkness as he did the first one, did he?
He directed it still, yeah.
He still directed it? Okay.
He still directed it. But there was a lot of production problems with Into Darkness. It actually took a long time, much longer than the studio wanted for it to get made. I think there was some problems with the script.
You think?
But, yeah. I say I'm being generous. But as far as your comment about, like, whether it's canon or not, it's been explained that basically there's the original timeline, and then they call it the Kelvin timeline now, which is what the movies take place in. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy with that explanation. I think that kind of works, because it's sort of like, okay, I got my Star Trek, you got your Star Trek. We all still enjoy it. It's fine. But my big problem with Into Darkness was, well, I have a lot of problems with Into Darkness, but I think the biggest thing was that it was so busy trying so hard to keep Khan a secret and make it like this big deal, like, oh my god, they're doing Khan, and all these like little things that they were doing the whole movie that just didn't add up. They didn't make sense. The whole thing was kind of a mess. I was most bothered by the Khan thing simply because they tried to make it a secret, even though it didn't fool anybody. I mean, like, any Star Trek fan is going to go into that movie and know very quickly that that's Khan. No one was shocked. Like, we all knew this was what they were going to do. And then you have this problem of the whole time they're essentially trying to make references to things from original Star Trek, but at the same time, almost not.
Well, right. I
like, coming from this weird,
coming from a casual fan. Well, coming from as a casual fan, like, it's almost like they blatantly would throw these fan service shots in your face to where a casual fan would recognize it as a fan service shot. And so I think it was just that much of in your face Star Trek, you know, like, remember this. It's, you know, full of member berries. It felt like that they just convoluted the script. Like they just wanted so much to happen.
Right. And there was so much they were trying to set up. You know, they tried to set up a Klingon war. They tried to set up this whole thing with Khan. They tried to set up the Federation with this giant mega ship. The script was just all over the place. Oh, they also tried to set up Dr. Marcus, I believe it was. I might be wrong about the name, because I'm just having trouble remembering right now. But basically, she's the mother of Kirk's eventual son from the movies.
Right.
And even that just felt very, like, rushed and kind of just in there. You know, not to mention they had that just gratuitous scene where she just got undressed for absolutely no reason. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, a little fan service is fine here and there, I guess. I mean, like, everybody has their opinion about it. Like, for me, I'm just like, whatever. I know you do this just to appeal to certain audiences. But that one was so gratuitous. It was so out of left field. Like, there was zero reason for this scene to exist other than to just see her in her underwear. Like,
it was there so Chris Pine could hit on her.
Right. I think, but the biggest problem with Into Darkness is that you're constantly trying to fight the Wrath of Khan, which is an amazing movie. You know, everybody loves Wrath of Khan. But at the same time, you're also, like,
it's the second film in the new universe, and you have Khan in it.
Well, and I would have been fine if Khan was in it, but if only this had been the first appearance of Khan, like Space Seed. I don't know how familiar you are with the original series, but the first appearance of Khan is in the original series in an episode called Space Seed. Mm-hmm. That's the storyline they should have done. Like, it's weird that they did this whole, like, pseudo kind of Wrath of Khan storyline, but not. And it was all about, like, just this rogue general who's making, like, a super ship. It was just really lame. You're trying to do all this stuff that kind of implies this history with Khan, but no one has a history with Khan. Like, I mean, even your target audience, by you opening this up to a bunch of people who aren't fans, and and you can speak to this because you're more of a casual fan yourself, but why on earth would you keep trying to reference this guy as like someone we have a lot of history with when you've just met him? Like, it doesn't work, like it would have made a lot more sense if they'd have first encountered Khan. I don't even mean that he has to do what he did in the original episode and like try to take over the ship. Right. You could have him do something else, but like, you need to introduce why Khan is so dangerous. The whole movie, they don't actually reference why Khan is dangerous or anything else. Like, old Spock has that line about he's very dangerous and don't underestimate him, but that's like
that's what I don't get is like, why can't you just tell him like how to defeat him? Like, it seemed like Spock wanted to give his younger self a riddle or some shit, and I didn't really understand that. Obviously he had prior knowledge of Khan, but then it's like he didn't want to tell him how to defeat them. I never got, what is Khan's magic blood? Like, what is that?
Well, that was just dumb. That was just for the movie. That doesn't exist in any other version of Khan.
Oh, good.
I mean, it's just
the midichlorians of that film.
It is very much. It's in film terms, it's called a MacGuffin. It basically means something that
the device that
it's a plot device.
Yeah, right.
That is all it was. And I really hate the fact that like Spock is so emotional in the movies. And maybe this is just me, but like I have nothing against Zachary Quinto. I think he's a good actor, but really don't like the fact that Spock is so emotional in the movies. And I know that they're trying to say that this Spock is young and he's different, and he was affected because his planet was destroyed and everything. And I get it. But Leonard Nimoy played Spock so logically, but there was this hint, this subtle undertone of emotion the whole time. Mm-hmm. And you had his deep struggle with his love and hate of his human side. And I get none of that in the movies. I don't get any of it. I mean, there's sometimes he's just blatantly angry. He's just blatantly all of these things.
Films nowadays have to play up the obvious. They almost have to lay everything out so blatantly. So I think that's why they, from what I've to understand, why they would want to show his emotion, but they never. It's almost like they never really established that he's ever truly logical either. Mm-hmm. It's like the impression that I always get from watching him is that he's always emotional, but he's just putting on this logical front.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't really work in the movies.
No,
I guess is what I'm getting. I don't think it does, and I'm even fine with him dating Uhura. Like, I know that bothered some people, but personally, I was like, hey, that's kind of interesting. It's something they hinted at in the original series. It's kind of nice that they just went for it.
I didn't mind it so much. I felt like they played up too much Into Darkness, but again, I think Into Darkness was so convoluted with plots and subplots that it just didn't know what to do with itself. Which is why in Beyond, I'm glad they just took care of it. Like at the very beginning, like, oh, they broke up, but they're still cool.
Yeah, there you go. That's all you need. And Beyond, I don't know. It was better.
I was not on board as much with the motorcycle scene. I thought the motorcycle scene was a little too, I don't know.
It felt to me more like a Fast and the Furious movie, and I'm not just saying that because of the director. I'm just saying, like, it's the pacing of it. They just kind of have this sort of pacing where it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going.
And that could be,
that could
be Justin Lin's
action. Well, it could be, but what I guess I'm getting at is it bothers me more that most of the movie is action.
Right.
And very little of the movie is plot.
Right.
And it's not like it's a terrible movie. I mean, it's definitely better than Into Darkness. I don't think it's as good as the 2009
It's a simpler movie, like, but it just felt to me like more like an episode of Star Trek. Like, it was very low key.
And that's true. I did like that. I did love the fact that it felt like an original, like like a classic.
And I guess that's what I more enjoyed about it. It wasn't like no, giant blue laser shooting into space.
Oh God, those are getting that was Venom-old. But
talking to you, Sony.
Sony. And I'm not saying that they didn't have great character moments in that one. They really did. I mean, like, especially some of the Kirk, Spock, McCoy stuff is great. Like that was really great to see again. But I mean, like, most of the plot, like, when it's really going, it's just action piece to action piece to action piece, and very little development of everything, and it just had a lot of plot holes and a lot of kind of convenient plot lines, And I'll be honest, the thing that really irritated me the most is the fact that Uhura, in that movie, like her entire character essentially devolves into, you're just here to walk around and let the villain explain his evil plan. Like, that's like all she does the whole movie is basically just follow him around and just listen to his evil plan.
She was the living MacGuffin. She was basically a plot device.
Yeah, she was. And it's such a shame that her character wasn't used better, but...
Yeah, I'm Gamora now. I don't need this shit.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Oh, well, that and she's probably got the next 20 Avatar movies lined up.
Yeah, I mean, hey, she's doing fine for herself, But getting back to the TV show, Discovery, if it ever comes out, I know they're talking about how this one's going to take place back in the original series time, like more in the timeline of the original classic Star Trek, actually before that. And I've got very mixed feelings about that, simply because Enterprise, it's like we've already done this, and it just feels... It's starting to feel like we're just going back and really rehashing a lot of the same stuff. And, it's interesting because I was never really big... You said you never watched Enterprise, right?
No.
Okay, so really all you need to know about that is that one is a prequel to the original series.
Okay. And
it was okay. It actually had a lot of potential, and in fact, a lot of its good ideas, like the truly good ideas it had as like a setting and the way they explained certain things, ended up getting used in the 2009 Star Trek. And they tried really hard to get back to the magic of the original series, and it just didn't quite click. And it really felt like they were trying to sort of reinvent themselves every season. Like it felt like there was a big shift season to season. I don't know. I could be in the minority on that one, but it's just between that and the prequels. I'm just kind of like, it would be really nice to go back to like, the Next Generation time period again. You know what I mean? Like
right, further down. Like how many years ahead of that was of the original?
I'm actually not really sure. I want to say it's.
They're fairly close together, aren't they? I mean, obviously, I'm sure the internet's going to be screaming at us right now. But
I know. I'm sure the other hardcore Trek fans are just shaking their head at me right now. But I want to say it's about 100 years. Okay. I know it's not one generation. I mean, I know they say it's the next generation, but I'm fairly certain it's somewhere around 100 years later.
Okay.
I think it's like 3 normal generations would have passed or something like that. So,
gotcha.
I'll be honest. I mean, I love Star Trek. I'm a very devout Star Trek fan, but the one thing I have never gotten into getting super technical with my fandom. I never liked, memorizing star dates and like looking at technical manuals. I mean, I'm mostly in it for the story,
You haven't taken a history class on the politics.
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, I deeply absorb the storylines, and I'm very familiar with them, but like I don't do a lot of expanded universe stuff. I'm mostly just a big fan of the TV shows and the movies. So just for clarity for my fellow Trekkers out there that are shaking their heads at me, I'm gonna give Discovery a shot. I don't like the fact that it's an online streaming exclusive.
To CBS All Access, I guess. They do.
Yeah, that's kind of lame.
Not even gonna actually premiere on CBS at all. Wow.
As far as I know, not. No.
Wow, they must have a lot of faith in this.
They're betting
either that or
they're betting the farm.
Either that or they're just exploiting Trek fans to sign up for their CBS All Access service.
I think eventually, and this is just me guessing, honestly, but I get the vibe that when they can, they're going to pull all the Star Treks from Netflix and Hulu and just put them on their streaming service. And I think that's going to be one of their big money makers.
Is everybody trying to make a cinematic universe out of every intellectual property out there now?
Yes. I'm not going to beat around the bush. Yes, that's exactly what they're all trying to do right now.
Everybody's trying to replicate Marvel.
Well, to be fair, Marvel is doing well. I mean, you can argue the quality of the movies, but the truth is you can't argue the results. That they're a cash machine at this point, and unfortunately, it's bleeding into other beloved franchises.
Well, there's certain franchises that it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I think Star Wars is one of those. Like, no matter what they do, they're going to piss off one half of the fans and make the other ones happy, and then vice versa. I think Rogue One's an example of that.
Rogue One is an example of that, but I'm nervous about Star Wars fatigue. I'm very nervous about that.
I thought it's already been happening to me. Anyway, I'm just
yeah. I mean, because one film a year, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, at least with Marvel, the nice thing about the Marvel movies is that they're
expansive. There's many characters in that. Star Wars is not.
Well, it's like each one is a mini story that's somewhat unrelated, and they used to be better at this. I would say in phase 1 it felt better than it does in phase 2. But the Marvel movies, it's like this is its own movie. Like, here's just a movie about Thor. Here's just a movie about Iron Man. And they don't have to link if you don't want them to. And they feel like separate movies. But a Star Wars movie always feels like a Star Wars movie. Like, Rogue One feels like a Star Wars movie.
To me, it felt like a Star Wars movie minus the humor. I mean, there was some in there with Alan Tudyk doing the robot, true. But I felt like they were shooting for gritty Saving Private Ryan, which I guess if you're going to experiment and do a different Star Wars film, you're going to want to do it in the spin-offs. You're not going to want to make episode 8 dark and dreary.
I mean, it was an interesting experiment, and in some ways it really worked. I know there were extensive reshoots, and there's a lot of drama about the reshoots and how different it could have been and everything. It sounds like from a very early on point, though, they had all agreed that everyone was going to die. I mean, from what I understand,
they couldn't just just steal the plans and go, here you go, and then bye. You know, and then like never see them again,
right?
For the entire next 3 episodes. I don't know, and for me, like it's obvious that from the beginning they were gonna die because I guess going into it and knowing kind of the outcome, it's like, oh, here's the adventure before this adventure, and is this one more exciting than the next one? I always have that issue with prequels, like when they're direct prequels. Like, unlike Prometheus, I mean, let's not talk about go into that yet, but...
Please don't.
Well, like, it being a prequel to, like, you know, kind of like the Alien franchise, but it's not a direct prequel. It didn't lead into Alien. But this, Rogue One, led directly into where Episode 4 picks up. Spoilers. So it's like I just knew where it was going, and
it took something away from it.
It did. I guess the sense of wonder, like, or the sense of adventure, because I just knew what was going to happen. It's like watching.
Well, it's predictable.
It's predictable.
And I agree. And you bring up a very interesting point, actually, because I very much agree with the idea of the direct sequel. The direct prequel problem, because I think that prequels that are further away can get away with a lot more.
Sure,
because you know, like I think a prequel is better off exploring an idea that wasn't very well explored in your original canon. You know, like I'm much less interested in watching the young adventures of Han Solo than I am exploring some of the stories that they've hinted at about what's happened in the Star Wars universe in the past. Because I already know what's going to happen to Han Solo. I know how he lives. I know how he dies. It's mildly interesting to find out how he got to be the smuggler he is, but it really doesn't matter. No. You know, like it's kind of like, oh, well, this is interesting, I suppose, but I don't... Because of what you're talking about, it feels very anticlimactic to me, because it's kind of like the draw of Game of Thrones. You know, Game of Thrones was really exciting to a lot of people because for the very first time, there's real stakes again. Your main characters can and probably will die. Like, no one is safe. So it brings the excitement back to watching a show, because you're not actually sure whether, if someone's in peril, they're actually in peril in a dramatic sense. Like, you don't know if they're going to make it. And the problem with a lot of movies is that you can't actually get that invested in what's happening to them, because you know they're going to be fine. If Han Solo in this new movie is going to be trapped and it looks grim and it looks like this could be it for, you know, the young Han Solo, like this is going to kill him, you know he's not going to die.
Right. Well, it was like with the Family Guy Star Wars, where they're like, they think they're going to die. And he's like, we got 4 of the 5 main characters on the ship. We're going to be fine.
Exactly. Yeah, it's that syndrome. And unfortunately, it's gotten really bad lately. But I think that's why I have a problem with prequels that are too close, too involved with the main story. And that's why I was saying, like, I'm trying to think of a really good example of something that was just briefly mentioned, you know, in like the movies that like could be explored more. And I guess you could argue the Death Star plans one wasn't a bad idea, but it just was so close to Episode 4. I mean, spoiler alert, if you have watched the movie, it's ridiculously close to Episode 4.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of timeline.
Okay, here's one thing I guess that I don't understand. At the beginning of Episode 4, Darth Vader seems to accuse her of being a spy, but it's like, if they saw that ship leave and he saw some plans being past, it seems okay, he knows, but then at the beginning of episode 4, it just seems like he's just accusing her, or I don't know.
I agree. Honestly, I know that I might be in the minority on this one, because I brought this up to some friends of mine, and they all kind of like, rolled their eyes and were like, "Oh, you're nitpicking." But it really, if you're gonna make a movie that's part of the canon timeline,
exactly,
like,
and the ship takes off, and then Princess Leia, like, when they catch up to her, she just tries to deny it. Oh, we're on a diplomatic mission. I'm like, you just left Darth Vader murdering the fuck out of your guys.
Yeah, there's a lot of memes out there about that, where he's basically calling bullshit on her now. And but seriously, in that conversation, he says...
Well, to be fair, that wasn't Carrie Fisher. It was just a hologram. So the real Carrie Fisher could have been on another ship.
Oh, you're talking about the CGI. Yeah,
bad CGI joke. Yeah. Sorry, that didn't register.
Sorry. I was thinking like the hologram she recorded in R2. My mind went way too far with it. If you listen to the dialogue of what he says in episode 4, even before he talks to her, when he's talking to the original guy that he's like choking to death, he talks about plans being beamed aboard the ship. Like this ship intercepted several plans that were beamed aboard.
Right.
And to me, it always felt more like this was transmitted to them. Like that always sounds more like like the Star Wars equivalent of someone emailing it to them. Or something like that. Like there was a transition of.
And you saying she denied the emails? Sorry. Keep going. Political joke.
No. Yeah. Oh man, definitely not getting into politics.
Galactic diplomacy.
Oh god, that's all the excitement of the prequels right there. Galactic diplomacy. I heard someone explain the prequels as basically like all the fun of watching like Star Wars' version of C-SPAN.
That's what I was thinking. It's just like, oh, you turn in, there's Congress. What are they voting on now?
Like, oh yay, there's a trade dispute. Exciting. Anyway, but my point is and again, okay, maybe I might be nitpicking, but like it always read to me as this ship was flying and it intercepted like some sort of radio or whatever technology they're talking about, transmission of the Death Star plans. Star Destroyer shows up and Vader's like, hey, you have something you shouldn't have. And then they're all pleading ignorance, and they're just basically like, hey, no, we're a diplomatic mission, like we got an ambassador on board, we're all cool. And then he's like, no, you're rebels, you're traitors, that's it. We're done here. But when you watch Rogue One, how is any of that up for grabs? I mean, how is any of that like debatable? I mean, they literally, Vader is standing there and he watches her ship fly off.
It's like a parent catching their kids doing something really bad, and the kid still tries to deny it. Like, it wasn't me.
It doesn't ruin it for me, but it's like, okay, I would have preferred a little bit more distance there or something. I don't know. Like I said, I might be nitpicking.
I mean, my nitpick, I guess, too, is when they talk about the standalone. This is a standalone film, but there's a few parts of it that really aren't, because it still feels like you need to have watched the previous films.
Oh, I agree.
Because they never explain the Force, really. You just see Darth Vader turn, throw his hand up and choke him. I was like, well, I mean, I doubt that anybody's going to really, I mean, who knows? Somebody might start with Rogue One, because there might be a parent that says, about our age, that says, okay, ignore episodes 1, 2, and 3. Let's just start with Rogue One. So there might be a kid starting at Rogue One and going forward, and then they're not going to explain the Force, and then, that'll be explained in the next film. Just, I mean, and I know that for 99.9999999% of fans know what the Force is when they went to see Rogue One, but that just a little hint or another short explanation would have helped it, but that is a nitpick, I think.
I liked the character of the priest monk. I liked the idea that they were talking about more people understanding and believing in the Force than just Jedi and Sith. I liked the acknowledgement that the universe is bigger than just Jedi and Sith, and the Force is a bigger thing. There was good elements in Rogue One.
Sure.
The biggest problem with Rogue One, in my opinion, is the lack of character development.
Oh yeah,
because so much is happening the whole movie that it's like, I don't know who these people are. The only one I kind of know a little bit about is Jin, and even then,
right. And even then, because at the end I didn't care as much as I felt like I should. I felt like that should have been a sadder moment.
Yeah. I agree 100%.
I just didn't care.
because you're supposed to be a lot more emotionally invested in them at that point, and you're supposed to care a lot more when they
Well, it was hard for me to know, like, knowing that they were going to die. It was hard for me to even want to get emotionally invested in it.
Well, and I'll be honest, I don't remember most of their names.
Right, yeah.
Like their character names.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because I wasn't reading a ton of stuff about it. So one thing I do with movies is I basically try to stay as spoiler free as humanly possible. And I know that not all hardcore geeks like me do that, but my philosophy is if I see a trailer or a TV spot or whatever to a movie and I say, I'm in. Like if I see something and I'm just like, yes, that looks awesome. I am there. I will be there opening weekend. I'm going to watch that movie. As soon as I make that decision, I don't want to see anything else. I don't want to see a single frame, a news story, anything about the movie. Because especially as they get closer and closer to the movie, particularly 2 weeks before the premiere, they will actually start saying spoilers. They will start revealing key points. Because at that point, they're not trying to get people like me into the seats anymore. They're trying to get people that are still on the fence. So they're trying to like divulge more secrets. They're like, okay, you're still on the fence? Here's a little
and then
more.
Why they release 7 trailers and then give away 15 minutes of the movie.
Exactly. And I don't like doing that. But because of that, I feel pretty honest in saying that when I watched the movie, I didn't know characters very well. Because I hadn't seen them a million times on like toy packaging or anything else. Like I can't tell. I know Jin. I know her name.
Yeah, right.
And I know the others for what they did. And I recognize certain others, like I obviously know the actor who plays the monk priest because of his work in EP1 and everything else. I don't know what his character's name was.
Right. And no matter what character he plays, every time he comes on screen, I'm like, hey, it's Forrest Whitaker. Yeah. Although I didn't really get it felt like to me he just committed suicide.
It was weird.
I was like, I'm done running. Done running from what? From weird. The nuclear explosion? They're going to stand up and fight that? Like.
Well, and it was really strange because they had this sort of almost apocalypse now sort of thing where it's like, he was one of us, but now he's gone rogue. You need to go talk to him. There's this weird thing where like he's a guy who's been pushed too far, but then she goes up and sees him and they're basically just like, I'm mad at you because you cared about me, and I'm mad at you because you cared about me, or some weird thing like that where it's like, I don't really understand why you two are upset at each other. And then basically she just watches a hologram of her dad.
She felt like a blank slate to me.
Well, it's weird that like you see so much of the turmoil she went through as a child. Like you see the whole thing about her dad getting taken, her mother getting murdered. But I didn't feel for her. And it's weird that like I could watch all that trauma happen, but I had a big problem with the fact that they started the movie with it.
True, yeah.
And this is just bad story structure because I really can't stand it when a movie starts off with, here's this horrible traumatic event. Okay, that's, by the way, that one's the main character. So this is why you should care about them. And then it cuts like forward like 10 years. To me, that's just lazy.
Yeah.
And honestly, that makes it harder for me to relate to them. Because it's like meeting someone right away and then basically saying, like, it's like you walk up and they're like, hey, by the way, this is Phil. And Phil shakes your hand and he says, my mother died horribly in a fiery accident 3 years ago. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, but whoa.
Yeah.
like okay, we just met. And I feel really bad. Like my sympathies for your family, but can we just talk casually for a minute? Like,
and I guess calling her a sociopath is kind of hyperbolic, but I just didn't connect with her, and I just felt like she wasn't. I don't know if it's how she was written or if it was the actress. I'm not going to point fingers either way, but I just didn't read any emotion.
To be honest, she didn't talk much.
Just in her face, it's not as bad as Mila Jovovich because I feel like she has the same face no matter what she does. I can't read her facial expressions at all. She's not as bad as that.
Okay.
She's not as bad as Mila Jovovich in that front. But then just through this movie, I couldn't read what was happening with her.
So you're basically talking about she has a neutral face, like she has a neutral expression
for somebody that doesn't talk as much. She just has a blank look on her face. So I don't know what she's feeling a lot of the time, but aside from what she's saying, and then half the time the way she delivers it, I'm like, I don't even know if she's telling the truth right now.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I honestly hadn't really considered that until you just mentioned it. And I'm like mentally going through the movie, and you're right. I think she has kind of this weird blank expression through a lot of it. And there really isn't an emotional reaction to most of it, though, I think. I'm not talking about when they die, but like even when people are in peril, it doesn't really register as much as I feel like it should. Right. You know, I mean, the city being blown up was really amazingly done, special effects wise.
Oh, it was a beautifully shot movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's gorgeous, but it's like every emotional beat, it misses the mark just a little bit. Does that make sense? It's like there's so many moments, like especially at the end when everybody's dying. This just feels so unearned, and it's like it's clear from the way it's shot and the music that you really want me to have that big emotional moment, and I just don't. Some characters, their deaths were almost a throwaway. Honestly, I kind of thought that what's Alan Tudyk's robot? It's K2, I think. I thought his death scene was kind of abrupt. He was actually one I had connected with almost more than any other character. Not because of his humor, but because just the way he talked and everything, like his interaction with everybody. Mm-hmm. I liked the fact that it was clear where he was coming from. He had a personality. You know, he had
the robot had a personality. Sorry, I'm just saying that. Yeah, because I just didn't get that much from her. I guess maybe because she did go through such a traumatic events. Maybe it like blew a emotional fuse or something. But I didn't connect with the main character as much. But maybe that was purposely done. I mean, maybe it was a bad decision, but maybe they did it purposely because hey, we're going to kill them off anyway.
Like I think the most I responded to any of their deaths was the monk priest played by Donnie Yen, just because he and the robot were probably the two that I actually liked the most. And I really think that a lot of it was just the charm of the actor. The actors really put that charm and personality into a character that in the script is probably a lot more blank. I think that's just good acting, because I feel like all of them, if you took all of the performances out of it and you just looked at the script, there's very little for most characters other than Jen. And I'm kind of with you. I think that Jen is so blank the whole movie. She didn't really respond that much to her parents as much as you would think. And her motivation seemed a little weird. The whole movie, it was kind of like, this is okay. I will say that the battle scene at the end, though, is just ridiculously awesome. I mean, pretty much that entire space battle sequence and everything is just so cool. Particularly the Star Destroyer going into another Star Destroyer. That's so badass. Right. I mean, like, I watched that scene, and I'm seriously sitting here thinking to myself, you know, honestly, that was worth the price of admission. Just this whole scene is worth the price of admission.
There's another part.
And the part with Darth Vader. The part with Darth Vader.
I laughed.
Just, like,
I'm sorry.
Completely...
When you did that, I laughed. I was loudly chuckling because that just kind of like out of nowhere, well, not really out of nowhere, but it just like busted out his lightsaber and just murdered the hell out of some people trying to get those plans. I was dying laughing. It was awesome. I think it was because that part for me was the coolest part. But see, like that's what I'm saying. Like I felt like the first like 45 minutes to an hour were so boring and so drawn out at the beginning, and she just was like this black hole of charm. Like I just didn't get the charm from her. Not the charm that I got from Daisy Ridley. And say what you will about the Mary Sue with her, right, but she was charming as hell in episode 7. And I think episode 7 kind of has the complete opposite problem that Rogue One had when you know exactly what the ending is going to be. It completely undid the happy ending of Return of the Jedi wholeheartedly. So it's like you just learned that everybody had a miserable life after that for the next 30 years. I felt like episode 7 just started. I mean, episode 7 was much more of a lighter tone, though, for sure, than Rogue One. But, you know, it's... But
episode 7 actually ended up doing a lot of things that they had talked about doing for Return of the Jedi. I don't know how familiar you are with any of this, but there was an ending they were considering for Return of the Jedi that the producer at the time and the writer both really wanted, and it was a much darker ending. It involved Han Solo dying, it involved Luke going off and basically becoming like a wandering monk figure. There were a lot of elements to that was a much darker ending. It was still similar in the fact that the Emperor still died and everything else, but the whole point was that this was supposed to be a we won but at a tremendous cost kind of ending.
I probably would have liked that ending instead of Yub Nub.
Yeah, but they got outvoted. And believe it or not, the actual producer left over that, because he was the producer for both the original Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. And especially the more I've learned about him through interviews, the more I realize he actually probably had a lot to do with the secret sauce of what made Star Wars so good. but he left and he was not involved in Return of the Jedi. He didn't want to work on it because of how they decided to go with it. Because it was basically George Lucas that decided to do the whole Ewok thing, and he wanted a much more commercially happy ending. So I thought it was interesting that in episode 7, they actually went and basically added those same elements that they didn't do in 6 and kind of made it happen in between 6 and 7. Luke still goes off and becomes the Wandering Monk, and Han Solo dies and everything. Spoilers for episode 7, by the way.
Oh, who cares?
It's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been long enough, and if you haven't heard by now, Han Solo dies. It's everywhere. And then and if you haven't seen, there's Luke Skywalker at the very end of the movie, because those pictures aren't everywhere.
Right. And tons of memes about it.
Yeah, the very beginning of it just, yeah. I mean, yeah, it made the happy ending that they did release of Return of the Jedi completely moot. I love the fact that the opening line is, "This should set things right." I was like, oh, that's probably a stab. It felt like Alien 3, like when they just killed Newt and Hicks. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, Leia and Han don't live happily ever after. They have a kid that betrays them. You know, like Luke's been a hermit. The New Order, which is basically the Empire, is somehow the New Order, even though the Republic Army that has the backing support of all these planets.
First Order.
First Order. Yeah, New Order. Sorry, that's Wolfenstein. Wolfenstein fan, by the way. But yeah, anyway, the First Order, which and this is brought up. Everybody brings this one up. Why is the First Order the army? Like, how is that the main military? I don't get that. Did they just blow up the new Death Star, and then the Empire was like, okay, that's all we lost was just that Death Star. Let's just change our name, and that's it. Because it seems like the Resistance should have like uprose after that and became like the main like force at that point. The rebels should have, but it didn't. I just never got
that. Here's how I always read it, because I watched it a few times and I was confused each time, but from the very little hints that you get, I always interpreted it as, after the events of Jedi, the rebels actually win and instill the Republic again. So the Empire falls. Like, basically, at the end of Return of the Jedi, the Empire actually collapses. And on Coruscant, they actually bring back the Galactic Republic.
Okay.
So by the time Episode 7 happens, the Republic rules over the galaxy. But there's still enough remnants of the Empire that they've regrouped and renamed themselves the First Order, and they're more of an underdog. They still exist and they're still powerful, but they're definitely not in charge. But what doesn't make sense about that is that they keep referring to the rebels as the rebels. Like, why on earth wouldn't Leia's army be just the Republic army?
That's what I'm saying. Why are they still the
it doesn't
Resistance?
make any sense. There's no reason they should be Resistance at this point, because they're now the actual main force. Now, once they did the whole Star Killer, thing, and they blew up Coruscant, which they never actually say, but it seems pretty clear that they blew up Coruscant. So they just wiped out the Republic again, just like that. Which, by the way, should be a bigger deal than it is in the movie. Like, if you wipe out, like, the center of the galactic political structure and essentially wipe out the Republic in one, fell swoop, I feel like that should be, mentioned more or something. I don't know. It just felt so glossed over. At that point, yes, then they would become the Resistance. Then good luck. You're rebels again. Go for it. But like at the beginning of the movie, it's like, why do we keep calling them the rebels or the Resistance? It's silly.
Here's one other part that I had. Maybe you can explain this, or I'm not sure. But like when Kylo is like praying to that tray of ashes with Darth Vader's helmet on it, he says, "Tell me again about the power of the dark side," which seems to insist that he's communicating with Darth Vader, and if he's talking to him about the dark side, does that not undermine Vader's redemption in Jedi?
See, I never actually took that as he was literally talking to Darth Vader.
Or is somebody pretending to be Vader in the communing, like Snoke? I
could see that happening.
Like Snoke pretending.
I still don't know where Snoke came from, and that's weird, because I really want to. I'm excited to see how they do things in 8 and how they'll address some of these questions, because a lot of people had questions about Snoke, but my biggest one is where do all these Sith keep coming from?
Yeah.
Like, I know that they made a big deal out of, there's only two, a master and an apprentice. But it's like,
Good.
I'm sorry, like virtually everything that Star Wars has ever done with the expanded universe and with anything, TV shows, or even just in the movies themselves, like there's gotta be something beyond just Sith. Like just those two. Because it's like way too many people know about the dark side other than Sith.
What?
I'm sorry. It's just like, come on. Like,
I'm making a prediction too that Snoke is like Lord Farquaad. He's actually like 2 feet tall, and he's just has like he has a complex about it, and he has to project himself really big. Just to throw that prediction out there.
Just for
he's like actually going to reveal himself, and he's going to be 2 feet tall.
I would get such a kick out of that. Like, it's ridiculous, but I would be happy to see that come true. I really hope that they're doing something about ancient Sith and ancient Jedi, because the way I always saw it was, especially because the whole thing was called The Force Awakens, and quite frankly, they really never explained what that was.
Everybody takes it as an awakening in Rey, but they're
Right,
it could lead into something else. But I get what you're saying with the ancient Jedi stuff, because isn't Kylo Ren's lightsaber an ancient design?
His is an ancient design, and Luke is at the first. Supposedly, Luke is at the original Jedi Temple. And what I'm kind of saying is, I love the idea that after Luke balanced the Force, or Vader did, depending on who you talk to, after the Force was balanced and Luke was the last one left at the end of Jedi, I like the idea that this is sort of the universe resetting. You had thousands of years of Jedi and Sith, and things got really crazy, and it finally got to the point where the powers, like the universe's powers of the Force or whatever, balanced itself out and said, okay, fine, you're done, But of course, it's not over. The Force still exists, and the light side and the dark side still exist. So I liked the idea that, like, basically the Force would start kind of getting back to its almost primal nature. It's like it's almost like the Jedi and the Sith kind of got so far away from the origins of everything over time that I like the idea that Luke goes back to discover how the original Jedi practiced, like what the original Jedi believed and how they fought and did everything. And somehow someone has gone back and is doing that with the Sith. So like, I like the idea that this is sort of bringing up this whole idea of they're starting again fresh.
Which it could be their plan because rebooting the Star Wars IP, and of course we're gonna have one movie every year. I guess that could make sense, yeah.
Which I really hope they don't go crazy with that, because again, Star Wars fatigue is really, because between this and the TV show, they got Star Wars Rebels, and they had the Star Wars Clone Wars TV show, which, I know a lot of people debate about, and a lot of people are like, oh, it's actually really good, and some people still really hate it. Personally, I didn't really get into it myself. I don't have anything against it, but it's just, to me, it was just a little too kiddie. Like, it's a little too, like, I don't mind stuff for kids, but this one it just felt so pandering. Like, if I was a kid and I was watching this, I would feel so talked down to.
You'd feel offended.
Do you know what I mean? Like I would have been insulted as, like, a 9-year-old with the way they were, like, talking to me. Maybe that's me. But,
no.
Like, all I'm getting at is between the TV shows and a movie every year. And unless, like I was talking about, unless those movies branch out into something that's more interesting, that's more unrelated.
Yeah, because
I feel like it's gonna be the fatigue's gonna set in real quick. Like I think a Knights of the Old Republic movie would be incredible. Like I would much rather go see a Knights of the Old Republic movie as a way to, like, give me a nice break between Star Wars main storyline numbers than I would, hey, here's what Han Solo was up to when he was 20-something.
Yeah, well,
still trying to figure out how to smuggle.
The universe seems so limited compared to Star Trek. I know who Han Solo is, and it's just like, it might be kind of interesting, but then that's it. Like, I don't need to keep saying, like, oh, here's where Han Solo came from. Give me something new, because I'm tired of Star Wars.
That's actually an interesting point. I've never heard someone say that the universe has a lot more potential in Star Trek than Star Wars. In a way, you actually have a good point there, because
it's
Star Wars at its heart is...
if you look at the original trilogy, like, how it's a very limited universe. When George Lucas tried to expand on that with the prequels, now I'm not saying that the universe he put it in was the problem with that, but when he put it in there, it's like I feel like everything he expanded on there was just terrible. Nobody wanted the Gungans. Nobody wanted whatever those robots that they don't use anymore. I guess they turned to stormtroopers after that.
The battle droids.
The battle droids. Like, and everybody hated all that. But then when you do episode 7, and it just felt like it was more of the same. And then when they expand with Rogue One, they try something a little new, but I don't know. I just think it's kind of like it's a hard thing to nail anymore. To make everybody happy, and I don't think it's going to do the same. There's never going to be an original Star Wars trilogy that is Star Wars. They just seem like they want to milk that nostalgia out of the original.
Well, and I think, just to your point about it being a limited universe, I think from a storytelling perspective, that's probably more because of the fact that Star Wars is a very operatic story, because it's essentially just a very sci-fi way of having this very primal, very basic good versus evil story. You have the light side Jedi and you have the dark side Sith, and it's just going to be them clashing again and again and again and again. That's all that it is, because the Empire and the Rebels are still light side, dark side clashing. I mean, like, one of the reasons Star Wars worked so well was because it was so basic, because it follows the hero's journey so perfectly.
Right.
And I think your point about Star Trek is that, and this is just me, kind of interpreting what you're saying here, so tell me if I'm wrong, but I think Star Trek is more of it's all about like the possibilities of the galaxy. Star Trek, there's always something fresh and new because there's always more galaxy to explore. Like, there's always new people to meet. There's always more.
They can introduce a new alien that could not be part of the original universe. I wouldn't know because there's so much there, and it wouldn't be as noticeable. But then when they introduce something new in Star Wars, it's so noticeable to me, coming from an outsider view, because like I know those limited characters from the original, the limited species. And Star Trek, I feel like, is just...
That's a good point.
There's so much to expand from. Star Trek's episodic, expansive. Star Wars is narrowly focused and well done. The original ones.
Yeah.
Except when you get to Jedi, I'm not going to... I mean, because I feel like the first 45 minutes of Jedi were pointless. That would be from them breaking out Han. I mean, I get it, because it's just like... I'm on the fence on it, because it's like, okay, couldn't they just show up and like say, we want Han, or we're gonna blow you up? Or I feel like the Rebels could have taken him back easier if they really needed him. And their plan, I still don't really know what their plan was to get him out, because it seems like they just had 20 plans and they tried to say execute all 20 plans at once, and whichever one of those should work. Because I really don't know why was Lando there? Like, how did he get there? Like, why was Boba Fett still hanging around? Like, I thought did he just like bring Han there, then stay there partying for how long was he frozen? Or did he just happen to be there? But I guess I can feel like that the Rebels wouldn't want to do that because, send the Force down there, like the in-Force, not the Force, but like in-Force, like come and demand him back, because Jabba...
That's not how the Force
because
works.
Jabba doesn't have any ties to the Rebels, and he could easily just call up the Empire, I guess. That would be my only justification on that.
It was a little convoluted, I'm going to be honest. I mean, I actually really like the first, section of Jedi.
Well, I feel like it should have been its own movie.
It feels more like an old school, adventure serial, which is kind of what Star Wars was based off of.
Well, I feel like it should have been its own thing, or its own movie. Like, I mean, hell, if they can make a movie about stealing plans, at least they can make a movie about stealing Han back.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I think that having it be the first 40 minutes of the movie was a little ridiculous. I think if this had been the first 10 to 15 minutes of the movie, it would have been a lot better. And I agree that it probably would have made a lot more sense if they'd have just all showed up at once. I mean, it was fine that like Chewbacca and Lando were there first, because we actually see them flying off in the Falcon at the end of Empire. So it's fine that they're there first. Leia and Luke should have showed up together, and there's really no reason that R2 and C-3PO should be there at all.
Would they have come back for the droids though? Because it's like, oh, we offer this as a gift. I mean, what if Jabba was like, oh, okay, here, take Han back, I need droids. Would they have come back for the droid?
Yeah, I think that's something we should save for another episode. I think we should explore Jedi, because this clearly is a sore spot for you. And I would love to actually go through this whole thing with you, but I want to get back to one point you made before, because I think it's really important.
I can ramble a lot, so I apologize.
No, it's okay. I think honestly this is a great idea for something to cover later. I really wanted to get back to your point about nostalgia, because you've touched on it a few times, and this is coming up a lot more lately. And this is something that's definitely becoming a problem with all of these movies and TV shows, basically all these franchises, because they all started somewhat in the realm of a few decades ago. What bothers me is not necessarily that they play to nostalgia. I think that's fine, like I think it's totally okay to acknowledge, hey, here's a cool thing you remember. It's the way they go about it that really bothers me. And more specifically, the fact that they believe that's a substitution for actual content and actual story. And that really drives me nuts, because it's like, if you're going to have something happen that's nostalgic, you should have it actually be a part of the story in a way that doesn't distract from the story. Perfect example is what I mentioned before. Like, I actually think hiding the Tribble in the background of that shot with Scotty in the original 2009 Star Trek is a great way to do that, because it's there, it's in the frame. If you happen to look over, you can see it there, and it's like, oh, hey, cool, it's a Tribble. But they don't draw attention to it. It's not talked about. It's just there. And the whole scene plays out as if it wasn't there. So you'd never notice it if you weren't a fan. What bothers me so much about the way they do things now is they go out of their way to cut to things and to linger on things and to just be like, hey, cool, remember this thing? Isn't this thing so awesome?
They want you to remember this cool thing. And it's like, I feel like the original Star Wars, like all the stuff that was cool in the original Star Wars wasn't put in there to be cool. They would put in there... Right. And people thought they were cool, but now it's like they want to put those in the new films just to be cool. Saying, remember the cool X-Wings and the cool TIE fighters? Mm-hmm. I mean, I know those need to be in there, but I'm just saying, I feel like those fans.
Yeah, but I was a little disappointed there's still X-Wings and TIE fighters. Like, it's been 30 years. Why don't they have something that's a little better? I mean, yeah, the X-Wing is slightly modified, but it's still an X-Wing, and that's still a TIE fighter. Have you guys done nothing to advance your space battling technology here? All of the ships in the prequels were changing like crazy. I mean, say what you will about the prequels, at least they actually said, hey, we shouldn't have X-Wings at this point. And they had the tech change. I think for the new show, it's fine if you have the Falcon. Like, I'm cool if you have the Millennium Falcon in there. Okay, that actually works for the whole Han Solo tie-in and everything. Fine. But they really should have different ships than just an X-Wing or a TIE fighter. Like, or at least have them be like the more advanced version that looks significantly different. Because really the only difference with the X-Wing is it looks a little sleeker. That's about it. Like, they just smoothed it out a little bit. And like the TIE fighter, it's basically like, oh, these are special TIE fighters. So they're all black, but they've got this red strip. That's it.
I don't want to brush over your quote from earlier. It's been 30 years. Can we not come up with something better?
Okay. That's a point for the prequel.
I just wanted to let's not brush over that quote. That's a valid point.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I think there's so many things that they do more because they're trying to get people who've seen the original to be like, oh, cool, it's this thing. But to me, and what I think is a big problem here, is what I'm talking about they use nostalgia in place of content. And I don't understand why, because try to follow me here for a minute. So if I go too far,
I think because they have they don't have the story. If they can't think of good enough story, it's like they think they can make it up with these like just quick shots. It's like fan service shot. I don't know, but I feel like there is a lot of almost too much in your face fan service.
Well, exactly. But what I'm saying is, one of the reasons I don't understand why they're doing this is because think about their target audience, okay? You're essentially doing a reboot. You're doing a new movie to try to get younger people to go see this movie who probably haven't seen the original. And I'm not just talking specifically Star Wars, right? I mean, I'm talking about all of them that are doing this lately. Like, every time they try to bring a new movie out that's based on an original movie, like the new Ghostbusters or one of the Terminators or what have you.
They never released a new Ghostbusters. Actually, they did. It's called Ghostbusters, the video game.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, back to space.
Moving on. What I'm getting at is, where's the logic in this? Because if you... I mean, think about it for a second. I mean, like, you're making these movies to basically remake a movie that worked really well decades ago. You're putting it in front of a new audience, and you're saying, hey, see this cool thing? People really liked it a few decades ago. You should probably like it now, because now we've done it, but we've updated it. So you guys will really like it.
If they're going to do that, they should reintroduce it in a way to where it would make the kids now remember it, and it would be nostalgia for them. It's like, oh, that's a thing that was nostalgia for my parents.
But do you see what I'm getting at, though?
Yeah.
It's like, it's silly to put nostalgic things in there when the whole point is to try to draw a new audience, because they don't care. And the thing is like, I mean, I'm one of those people that they're targeting for nostalgia, but I'm not even that old, I mean, I'm in my 30s. And I mean, I pick up on this, like a 20-something-year-old might pick up on it, but probably wouldn't, depending on how much they watched these movies when they were a kid. It's just strange, like I don't understand where that whole logic point is coming from,
No, I agree. Yeah.
Like, what are they trying to get out of this is, I guess, what I'm getting at. Because it's sort of like
money.
It's sort of like, making them. Well, I guess, no, I know. But what I'm saying is it's like, are you really making the remake for a new audience, for a new crowd, or are you making the remake so that the original crowd will see it and just be really impressed with the new fancy CGI, which, by the way, has impressed no one ever.
What are you talking about? Blade has the best special effects ever. They've dated so well.
I mean, like, I'm not saying that, the originals didn't have special effects that have clearly aged poorly.
They had charm, though.
I mean, like, there are some special effects in older movies that are just horrible. They do not hold up whatsoever. But I don't see the point of doing an entire new version of the movie that usually isn't as good, just so that, like, we can have fancier special effects. In this case, and I know I might get lynched for this, so before everybody grabs their pitchforks, hear me out.
It'd be lightsabers in this case.
It would be. Lightsaber pitchforks. Ooh. Interesting. I would much rather them do a special edition of that movie where they update the special effects. Like, if that's really what you're doing, if that's the whole point, I'd much rather them say, here is the same movie you've liked before. We're going to do a limited theater release, but all we've done is we've cleaned up the special effects and they look like a million times better. And now you can watch it in theaters again for a few weeks.
That would also cost money that I don't see the studio caring too much. I mean, I guess Disney, they have money. At this point, I'm just like, man, just leave it alone.
Believe me, my preference is for them to leave it alone. But what I'm getting at is like, if you're gonna do a remake or a reboot or something like that,
but they always change a little bit. If you're gonna change something, like, go all out. But then it's like sometimes they remake these things and then change like 5% of it, and it's like, why? Like, why did you pick that? What was the point?
When it comes to reboots, you're walking this weird line, because you either you can't just remake the same movie, because otherwise you end up with that weird Psycho remake from years ago. I don't know if you remember it. That's so close to the original, except it's in color. And it's like, what was the point of this? Like, Hitchcock made a brilliant movie. Just watch the Hitchcock one. Like, I don't know why you even bothered, because it's so close to the original. Then you have other reboots that other remakes or whatever you want to call them, that are so far away from the source material that you're just like, why did you even put the name of it on here? Like, why even relate it? So it's a tough thing, because it's like, on the one hand, you're trying to bring a new cinematic universe together, or you're trying to modernize things, but at the same time, you want to keep the charm of what made the original one work.
Everything seems just too calculated for purposes of, okay, this is going to be the trailer shot, and we need this shot because we need, fan service of. They don't. It seems to be marketed. They want to calculate what they're doing for marketing purposes, not story purposes.
Right. Since this is our first episode, and listeners don't know much about us, I'm a very big film enthusiast. I'm a filmmaker myself, and one thing that's become very clear lately is that it has become a very producer-driven industry, particularly marketing. And basically what that means is that the money people are the ones really making the movies now. Like, one of the reasons that movies were so good back in the 80s and back in, like this golden era where we got Indiana Jones and we got the original Star Wars and where we got Back to the Future and, so many movies that people love so much, is because there was an era there where Hollywood was failing badly. They realized they were insanely out of touch, and they didn't know what to do. So what they did was they hired all of these young, talented filmmakers straight out of film school. And they basically just said, just make something. We don't get it anymore. Somewhere in the upper brass, they acknowledged that they didn't understand what the public wanted anymore. So because of that, you had all of these visionary people like, Spielberg and Coppola and everybody making movies like The Godfather and E.T. and everything. And it worked, and it worked in a great way because ultimately they gave these people creative freedom. Now, that doesn't always work. We got a lot of terrible movies in that era, too. It's easy to remember. We got a lot of terrible movies in that era because equally poor directors got just as much freedom as good directors did.
Well, I feel like that's what studios seem to want anymore is just a yes man just to direct by committee. They just want they want a director so a name can be attached to it, but it's really directed by a board of directors. Pun intended.
Yeah, it's mostly directed by marketing and focus groups. It's very calculated. And unfortunately, the passion of storytelling goes out the window at that point. Because I'll take a Marvel movie, for example. A lot of people have mixed feelings about the Marvel movies, and I don't want to get into it right now. But I will acknowledge this, that whether or not you still like the Marvel movies, they figured out a formula with the original Marvel movies, especially in Phase 1, that they've followed very closely to the point where it is a formula, and you can tell that it's a formula because basically you introduce a character and you have them do these little quips, and they have that in place of character development. These little jokes and these little moments between them that humanize them, but it doesn't actually develop their character. It just makes you kind of like them because they made you laugh. And
it's the character interaction. It's why it was able to get through Into Darkness. Like I like the interaction between all the actors. I think the cast was great.
Right, and that's a good thing. From a storytelling perspective, that's a very good thing. But the problem is they're doing that only.
Right.
And they're not actually putting real scenes of character development between characters. It's sort of like it's the difference between having an acquaintance and having a friend. Because that acquaintance, you'll catch him in the hall and you'll be like, hey, how's the weather? Or did you watch the game? Or whatever you talk about. But you only know that person to that level. And that's different from someone that you invite over and that you hang out with on the weekends and that you know about their life. You know what's going on with them. You feel like you know them as a person. Mm. That's what I'm getting at, is that the characters in a lot of these newer movies are acquaintances. They're not people that you can really emotionally invest in. And that's, that's kind of what we were talking about.
Well, that also comes back too with like the prequels, I think, with Obi-Wan and Anakin's relationship.
The closest thing that we ever see is the beginning of episode 2, where they're riding in the elevator together, heading up to Padme's apartment. That's the closest thing I've ever seen in any of the prequels to them actually having a more friendshipy kind of moment, with the exception of maybe when they arrive on Coruscant in episode 3, right before he goes to see Padme. Those two moments are kind of it for them pretty much the whole time, and even those feel forced. And I know for a fact that the moment in episode 2 that I talked about with the elevator was actually a reshoot. That was actually a pickup. Because they knew, watching the movie, they acknowledged that they were like, oh, geez, we don't have a moment here where Anakin and Obi-Wan are actually friends. Because they're arguing the whole movie. I'm like, well, that's fine. I'm glad that you knew that. But why on earth did you think that scene would solve all those problems?
Right. And to disclose, it is really difficult to make a good movie. As you know, because it is everything very, very has difficult. To work out. The casting, the acting, the editing, the script. Mm. I mean, the costumes.
And if one of those things is wrong, it all falls apart. There's a reason that people talk about a movie being a really good movie, like Capturing Lightning in a Bottle, because you do have to have so many things align perfectly for it to work. And I have a lot of respect for everybody that works.
Even bad really films, I respect because they did something. Like. Because it's really difficult to make it, and a lot of the films that I'm a fan of bad movies too, but I feel like those have the most interesting backstories too. Those are why I like the documentaries, like the Electric Boogaloo documentary that's on about Canon Films on Netflix. Yeah. I absolutely love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is very difficult. So we can be cynical a-holes all we want about what Hollywood's doing, but at the same time, they have the money and means to do it right. It's like they just choose not to because they're going to make their money anyway, which it from a business standpoint, I can't blame them, but
what it really comes down to is that they've taken an industrial approach, and I think that they've been wanting to do this for quite a long time. And I think honestly, modern technology with the ability we have now to collect data and to analyze big data allows them the opportunity to industrialize the process of filmmaking a lot more than ever before, to the point where it's assembly line filmmaking. Yep. They really want to get to a point where they basically say, we need a sci-fi movie in this block for this age range, basically just to make X amount of money. And then from that, they have a formula that says, okay, we're going to take this actor that's really popular right now, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. They make a movie out of it with a script that's basically just generated from all those elements. And it doesn't matter if it's good or not, because that's the sad truth, is that Hollywood has realized that it does not matter if the movie is actually good. As long as it gives them the return on investment.
Which is why a lot of it goes into marketing and hype.
And they're actually making a lot more movies for not even our market anymore. Like, there's a lot more movies being made solely to be marketed to China and Russia.
Transformers.
Right. And so those movies might bomb horribly here, and we're like, we have no interest in this, but they actually play very well over in those markets. So they don't make those movies for us anymore. And part of that is because those other markets, the filmmaking in those countries, they actually have made good movies. I mean, like, there's some really good Chinese and Russian films out there, but they don't have the giant overbloated special effects budgets that are.
I think Hong Kong,
like, they don't have.
Hong Kong is some of the best cinematographers, like, especially when they come to shooting action.
Oh yeah,
it's like, it's not that those quick cuts.
Oh,
you don't have
amazing.
those like quick cuts that are just like, oh, their actors don't know how to fight, so if we just do all these cuts that can make up for it.
Yeah, but they don't have the spectacle that we're used to. We've been watching these huge overbloated, CGI rich films for a couple decades now, but China has only recently started allowing more foreign films, to come in and be displayed in China. They still heavily censor them. I think they only allow something like 20 films from the US to actually come in to China every year. I think the big reason that Chinese audiences are responding so well to these movies is because it is the first time they've really seen big special effects bonanzas that we're kind of over. Like in the US, we're just like, oh, look, a giant robot. Cool.
I would have loved to have started there. Like, if that would have been the first CGI that I've ever seen, like, started at the quality that it's at today, that would have been awesome.
Oh yeah,
so I'm sure I would be flocking to the theater if I had not seen that quality before. Like, I wouldn't, because I was like, I don't care if I have no idea what's going on or how bad the script is, and they're just going to go to pace and see robots destroy buildings and each other.
Yeah, I don't really blame them, because we had to sit through a lot of terrible CGI to get to the point where we are now, and unfortunately that has corrupted our perception a little bit, because people debate endlessly about CGI now. And it's in that weird uncanny valley where you're not really sure what's CGI and what isn't. And it's tough, because I'll hear people endlessly debate online. They're like, oh, that CGI looked so fake. And then you find out it was actually a practical effect or something like that. And I think it's just made a lot of modern audiences kind of jaded to it.
We assume a bad effect is bad CGI now.
Right.
But there could still be bad practical effects.
Yeah, a bad effect is a bad effect whether you do it one way or the other. I still love movies, I still love TV shows, and I still think that we can get good stuff. I feel like there's a lot of passionate filmmakers out there who are really just dying to get their shot, and then they're going to make amazing movies. Because it's already started to happen. New filmmakers have already started popping up here and there, and they are actually making really good movies. And occasionally one gets through the cracks, and it's like, I feel like eventually something is going to give. And someone's going to realize that this is still an art form, and, you can do it so that you can make a lot of money at it. Eventually, people are just going to wake up to the fact that they care more about a good story than they do about how it looks. And I think that's where we're at. I think we're getting to the point where people are caring a lot more about a quality story than how good the special effects look. And I think that's fantastic, because I think about Firefly, for instance. Firefly was an amazing TV show. Its special effects did not age well.
No, it's
in
video game terms.
I love Firefly, but I'll acknowledge it. In video game
terms, that's gameplay over graphics.
Exactly. But Firefly, the reason it has the staying power and the reason everyone still loves it so much was because the story was so good. We could forgive the effects and all the other stuff because it didn't matter. The story was amazing and the characters were great, and we knew those characters. We really got to know them and we felt for them.
That was Fox's fault, if I remember correctly in the story of of Firefly.
It was all Fox.
Because they didn't even air the episodes in order.
There's still it's still a tender spot to me about what happened with Firefly, and I'm sure that's the way it is with most fans of the show. But my point is like, to me, that show gives me hope about what we can do in the future. And I think there's been some attempts lately, some better than others. I watched that Dark Matter show.
That show was okay.
It was okay. It definitely felt like it was trying for a Firefly kind of vibe, and it just wasn't working.
I liked the first 2 episodes, and then it just went off a cliff for me from there. And the first 2 episodes were just kind of okay. And then after that, I was like, yeah, I'm not watching this anymore. Because I like that initial story of that they were going to kill the people that they thought they were going to be there to save at first because their memory's been wiped. But then after like the 3rd episode, I was like, I don't even care who wiped their memory. The show is like not doing anything for me anymore.
I made it through the first season, and it didn't get much better. And, there's not even like you can point to one specific thing. You could say what you want about the acting or the writing or whatever, but it was just, overall, it just felt like a very meh show. But at the same time, I'm hoping for new and better ones coming down the pipe. I've heard very good things about The Expanse. I have not watched it yet. I will be hopefully watching that pretty soon here.
We still, and to that note too, we still do get good films, I think, once in a while. I really like The Arrival. It's good sci-fi.
That was good sci-fi. That's good old sci-fi. Like, I really appreciated the fact that reminded me a great deal of the old Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke kind of sci-fi.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
completely.
It's like almost more like a cerebral sci-fi, and it's so rare.
Well,
to get
it wasn't
anymore.
Big and loud and aliens taking over. It was them trying to communicate, and it was just a very smaller, simpler story. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like Christopher Nolan's Interstellar, but that was on that movie was on a grander scale. But I really like the small, focused world in The Arrival. I like the ship design, simple, sleek. It still felt alien.
Yeah, organic.
Right.
Although I'll be honest with you, my only real problem with Arrival was the fact that when and this I guess might be a minor spoiler for Arrival, but this is revealed to you within the first 10 minutes of the movie, so I don't think it's that big a deal. But when they first see the aliens and they first go to communicate with them, they kind of looked like giant spiders to me at first. Because it like crouched in that weird way that looked very spider-like.
I bet you were ready to leave the theater.
And there was seriously a moment where I was like, nope. I was so freaking out because like I have a horrible fear of spiders, but thank God, like they ended up being more like a squid or something. But like, oh man, that first shot, I'm like, I was like halfway out of my seat. I'm like, I can't. If this is gonna be 2 hours of spiders, I can't do it.
It's the spider people from Arachnadia. That would have been like your hell film.
That would have been horrible.
Oh, that would have been amazing. Then the theater locks everybody in there, makes you watch.
I'm like, oh no, you're not going anywhere.
Did you ever see Sunshine?
No, I have heard very good things about it.
It is a very good film. It's I've been looking for it. Alex Garland was one of the writers, or I think may have been the writer, because he and of course Alex Garland, he wrote 28 Days Later and actually the 2012 Dread.
Oh, really?
He also, his first directing was actually Ex Machina in 2015. But he's the one who he wrote Sunshine. It was actually directed by Danny Boyle. It's very good. I like the direction they went with it, so I do recommend. I won't give any spoiling or discuss that anymore, but I'll recommend Sunshine.
Well, and Ex Machina is another really good example of really good modern sci-fi. Like I really enjoyed Ex Machina. I thought it was well done. It's definitely not like your big blockbustery kind of movie.
But I like that.
It's nice.
It felt like
it's nice to see.
It felt like just a small, intimate film, and I like that.
Well, on that note, I think we should probably wrap this up for this episode. We've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about a lot of things, but we have to save a lot for next time.
Yeah, we got to try to keep these somewhat focused, so we'll try not to go too much in a tangent.
We will try to be better at that in the future. We're going to try to stay on top.
Well, that happens with you and I, though, so I'm sure it won't be the last.
It does.
But we try to keep on track.
So anyway, thanks for joining us, and we hope to have you guys come back and sit down with us the next time we have another episode of Space Problems.
All right. This is Ben.
This is Derek.
We'll see you guys next time.